And everyone was going, Jody, you gotta understand, your dad did this for you. I'm like, he didn't ask my permission. That's not what I wanted, so why would he do it? I'm Jody Plauche. I'm the author of the book, Why Gary Why. I'm a victim advocate, and I'm a victim from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When I was 10 years old, I started taking karate from a man named Jeff Doucette, who we didn't know was he groomed my family, he groomed me, and eventually he started me, and he me for almost a year before he kidnapped me and took me to California. He was eventually arrested after about 10 days in Anaheim, about a block from Disneyland, and I was flown back March 1st. I flew from LAX direct to New Orleans, and I guess the sheriff office, they were too cheap to pay for a direct flight, so they actually 2 weeks later on March 16th had a connecting flight. They flew from LAX to Dallas, but then they flew him to Baton Rouge. So my family had to make the trip an hour to the New Orleans airport, where Jeff got the luxury of coming home to Baton Rouge. Well, my dad used to work for a TV station called WBRZ, and he was friends with everybody, and he used to entertain people about half a mile from WBRZ on Highland Road. It was right there by LSU, and that's where he entertained clients. Well, that Friday, March 16th, my dad was in there, as usual. He was eating gumbo, because Friday in March, they served gumbo, and Bob Shadell was the program director for Channel 2, and he looked at my dad and he's like, look, when do they bring your boy back? And my dad was like, I think he's back already, like, but they're not going to tell me. And he goes, I'll go find out. So he went to the payphone and he called Channel 2, found out what time Jeff was coming back, and told my dad. So in order to say, oh, do you think they created a news story? Absolutely. But I don't think they created the news story they got. I think they wanted my dad to go, make a scene, confrontation, yell at him, try to hit him, try to punch him, get arrested. But to be disguised, he wasn't even disguised. I mean, my dad always wore a cap and baseball glasses, and he had a beard. Like, it wasn't like it was a fake beard. I mean, he had a beard. And he went to the payphone. He was actually on the phone with his best friend, and he told him, he's like, oh, they're coming. I'm pulling the gun out of my boot. You're going to hear the shot. So my dad, on March 16th, about 9:20, turned around and shot my karate teacher. And it wasn't live. Everybody goes, oh, on live TV. I mean, it was captured live, but it aired like 40 minutes later. And they had to make a decision of what they were going to show. Like, do you want to show the blood, the gore? On my website, if you go to my website, I have the unedited tape, and you can see a lot more gore than you see on the news footage. So they were able to edit it, cut it, and then air it. And then my dad got probation. He didn't do any jail time.
I've been extremely open about my mental health struggles with you guys over the years. I have talked about my anxiety. I've talked about depression. Obviously, a lot of you guys know that I'm sober. I'm coming up on my 3-year sobriety anniversary, and getting sober was the absolute best thing I've ever done for my mental health. And so, as you guys know, mental health is obviously incredibly important to me. And I feel like we need to talk about it more. We need to be more open. We need to have these conversations, not only with ourselves, but with loved ones in our lives. And we need to make talking about mental health less taboo. I know for a fact, I've benefited immensely from seeing a counselor and from talking to a therapist. And if you want to improve your mental health, the first major step that you can take is signing up for therapy. And BetterHelp makes that incredibly easy. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier. All you have to do is take a quick quiz online, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist very quickly. And you can communicate with that therapist however you want to, whether it be by phone, video call, or even text message. And if you're not vibing with your therapist, you can switch anytime at no additional cost, which I think is an incredible part of BetterHelp's service, that they allow you to do that. Over 6 million people to date, including myself, have gotten help through BetterHelp, earning a 4.8 out of 5 rating on the App Store. So if you want to start your therapy journey today, all you have to do is click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/theparanormalfiles and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Just visit my link, betterhelp.com/theparanormalfiles, to get 10% off your first month of therapy today. I recommend therapy to everybody that I know. I think it's the best thing you can possibly do for your mental health, for your sanity and your happiness. And yeah, anyways, y'all, let's get back to today's video.
I made a wish. I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the world.
I love you so much. It's weird how you two are dating all of a sudden.
I would like to cancel a wish.
Sorry, we don't really do that.
Obsession. Rated R. Only in theaters May 15th.
You know what's kind of messed up is even if I include the messed up events, I consider my childhood great. You know, growing up, I played sports. I would play football, basketball, softball. I remember, you know what, and let me just pay a little tribute to Kevin Kuig. He was my soccer coach, and he just passed away earlier this month. You know, so I was just school and sporting practice and then games. And so, no, I had a great childhood. You know, my family was wonderful. And like I said, even including all the other things, I still consider my childhood great.
What was a memory that you have going off of that of your dad from when you were growing up? Do you have anything that sticks out to you? Like,
well, I think the most important thing was that he was involved in our lives. Like, you know, he was our football coach. He was our basketball coach. He was our soccer coach. And he was a terrible coach. He was no Nick Saban or, you know, he wasn't even a Les Miles, but he was there. He was there to spend time with us. I mean, even though he had an ice chest full of beer and he had a Coke can, he would take a Coke can and he would cut the top off. And so he was able to put his 10-ounce beers into the 12-ounce Coke can, and he could just drink his beer and no one knew. You know, so even though he was doing that, he was still there. Unfortunately, I don't know if my life would have been better, but he didn't accept promotions for work because it would cost him to travel. So my dad just wanted to be there with his family, come home at night, eat dinner, and, you know, drink himself to bed.
Sounds like a pretty nice life, honestly. Just very, very relaxing.
Yeah. No, I mean, other than the kids part, you know, that's what I do.
Right. I guess kind of reading about all this and reading your book, your dad sounded like a really friendly guy and that he made friends kind of easily. Is that true?
No, absolutely. He was the entertainer. He was the host of the party. And I'll tell you a funny story. One night, me and my girlfriend at the time, it was on Valentine's Day, and we went to this restaurant. It's called Le Rouge Gardens, and they had like some of the best steaks in Baton Rouge, which ironically enough, Rouge Chris had the second, but actually it would have been the third location in Baton Rouge. And so my dad was drinking a fish bowl, like literally, like think of a goldfish bowl. And it was probably like a 96-ounce beer. And he was drinking out of a big fish bowl. And so we ate our steaks and we were leaving. And he looked at me and he goes, Jody, he goes, when you get home, I don't want you to lie to your mother. If she asks you if I drank, you be honest and tell her I only had one beer.
Oh, that's cold. That's funny as hell. What happened? What'd you tell her?
I said he only had one beer. I mean, granted, you know, normally when you count beers, you do it in 12 ounces, but he only had one beer because this is in a big fish bowl.
There you go. Are there any other stories that you'd want to share about him or just memories of your childhood that were really nice?
Well, there was one moment, it was before the adjudication of his sentencing, like before he even got indicted, I think. We were in a backyard and he was cooking hamburgers. And so he lit the charcoal grill. And before he lit it, you know, he sprayed it with lighter fluid. And he looked at me and he goes, you want to see Jeff? And I was like, no, I don't want to see Jeff. He goes, if you do. And he lit the grill and he squirted the charcoal and the big flame came up. He goes, look down in the middle.
Holy shit. That's crazy, man.
So to answer your question, he was the life of the party.
I guess when you were younger, what got you started on karate? Like, were you interested in it? Was it something that your parents just kind of put you in?
No, I was not interested in karate at all. Because like I said, I was playing football, basketball, soccer, and softball eventually led to baseball. I got a flyer in 5th grade that said karate. And I literally balled it up and threw it in the waste paper basket, threw it in the garbage can. My little brother went to a different school and he got the same flyer, but he didn't participate in any of the other sports. So my mother figured like this was something they could put him in to get him in, you know, involved in extracurricular activities. And when she did, she signed me, my older brother, and our neighbor. They all signed up. So it wasn't something I was interested in. Like I said, I threw it away. But it was something my mother was trying to get my little brother involved in. So I'm going to blame him for me being molested. But but he appreciates the fact that I was the one that was molested because he was next. Because I would have aged out and he was like a little smaller version of me. And so I used to bring him, when I was in high school, I would have an idea of how I wanted my hair cut, and I'd make them cut his hair first so I could see if I liked it or not, and then I would decide whether I wanted it. Because we look that much alike.
That's smart, man. Speaking of like karate and kind of getting into it, what was your first impression of Jeff when you first met him?
No, I remember the first karate practice we had at it was a dojo. It was over a supermarket, and you had to walk up the steps. You go in there, and it was awesome. They had heavy bags, they had speed bags, they had mats, they had jump ropes, it was a legit dojo. And so I thought it was awesome.
And that's, obviously how a lot of predators will get close to kids, is by bringing them into places like that. And
it doesn't just work with predators, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I drive a 2016 Nissan Sentra, and I haven't been on a date in 10 years. But I'm telling you right now, if I drove a Ferrari, I probably would get that date. So it's just kind of how things are.
Yeah, right. So when you were in karate, as things progressed, Jeff started to spend time with y'all outside of time, spent in the dojo. What was that like? What do you remember from that period? Like, did it stick out to you? Was it strange?
Well, so the first time that I remember doing anything outside of just regular karate classes was Jeff told my parents that they have a fighting team, and they travel to tournaments, and they were going to New Orleans. And normally the night before they go on a trip, they do something fun, go to the movies, go to dinner. And he asked my mother if we could go to see this movie, They Call Me Bruce. And my mother called her brother and said, hey, can you run a background check on this guy? He seems like a good guy, but I don't want to let my kids go with some stranger. And so allegedly my uncle went and looked up and said, no, he's fine. And, traffic tickets, and there's no felonies on his record. And so my mom allowed us to go to the movies with him to go see They Call Me Bruce, which was a terrible movie. You know what? I might watch that tonight, because I watched a fish called Wanda, and I don't think They Call Me Bruce is going to be worse than that shitty show, because that was terrible. But so after, my cousin was having a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. So we left the movie theater. We met up with the family. So he got to meet my aunts, my uncles, my parents. He got to meet everybody. So that was his way of kind of grooming the family. And, he integrated himself into being like a fun guy, very charismatic. And yeah, so they kind of welcomed him.
And he grew kind of close to your parents. What did they think of him? Did they just think he was some normal, like, nice dude?
Yeah. He had told them, and this was early on, that the reason why he loved kids and he loved being around kids, he couldn't go because he liked to have sex with them. But he said that when he was like 7 years old, he had an accident, and he literally was climbing over a fence, and his, sack got caught on the fence. And so basically he got a vasectomy indirectly. So that's why he loved kids. So I think that kind of took the sexual perversion off the table. So my parents were kind of like, oh, okay, he don't want, he can't have sex. So that's why he loves kids. So he won't have sex with our kids. And that was just kind of part of the grooming process.
What a bizarre story to share,
Not if you're a pedophile.
Well, yeah. With hindsight, it makes sense. But I guess, is there anything from that time period that stuck out to you before he started like actually molesting you that was really off, or was it just kind of normal?
No, it was more than normal. I got a friend of mine, and I love him to death, and he's wonderful. And I actually one day might make him the executor of my will to make sure he does everything. And he is so nice, but it's almost like he's too nice. You know what I'm saying? So Jeff was almost like too nice. Like, he seemed too awesome. He seemed too realistic. Like, oh, he loves kids. No, you know what? No single 24-year-old man who is normal wants to spend time with 10-year-old boys. I totally don't think that happens.
If you're obsessed with children and you're single, it just doesn't, it should be a red flag, but so many times predators and people like that are able to, like you've talked about, like downplay that stuff so that it seems normal. It's always interesting to hear how these people have these different excuses or ways that they work around the kind of weird things to gain trust.
I do want to say one thing. There are a lot of great coaches, great mentors, and I don't want to disparage them. But when you look at who are doing it, it's those that put themselves around children.
Yeah, they're attracted to those positions. Not, necessarily saying the positions are bad positions. It's like youth pastors or school teachers. Like, there's so many great people in those fields, but of course, when you have a position in society that's going to get you access to children who are, typically unguarded or not even, surrounded by their parents, they're just kind of yours, especially with teachers, that will just naturally attract those people who seek that access to kids. So you can't blame the people who are in the profession. It's like you have to blame the offenders and society in general. So what was your first memory? And if it's too much, like, you don't have to talk about it, but
No, I'm good.
what was like the first time that Jeff started to get kind of touchy with you?
All right. So again, that's a question that, being 53 years old, I can reflect back on. Like, the first time in my consciousness it happened, I was driving the car. His quote unquote girlfriend had a 280ZX, and it was a standard. And so he would do the sticks, the clutch and the steering, I would do the steering, but he would do the shifting. And I was driving the car around the block in my neighborhood, and he put his hands in my lap. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of weird. But that was the first time it registered in my mind. But I think the first time it happened was at the karate studio. He's like, oh, you need to stretch. So he's like, oh, look, do a split. So I'm doing a split. And so he's like, oh, look, your inner thighs are tight. You need to get those loose so you can kick. So I think that was kind of like his subtle introduction, because groomers, they do that. So if I'd have been like, Jeff, you're touching my, he'd have been like, oh, it's an accident. So they use that so they can kind of screen out which kids they can molest and which kids they can't molest. And I guess, like I said, I've said on many occasions, I guess I passed Jeff's test because, he eventually had his way with me.
Right. And I guess moving on then, I remember there was a tournament in Houston where your family and Jeff were all in one room sleeping together. Can you talk about that?
The family wasn't sleeping in the room with Jeff. It was, my dad wasn't on this trip, but my dad had gone on a trip to Houston with us. So we had made several trips to Houston, but this one particular trip in April of '83, my dad, my two brothers were there, but the family wasn't there. So that wasn't the scenario. But yeah, Jeff just told me, he goes, tonight when everybody goes to sleep, I'm going to perform oral sex on you. He didn't say it that way, but you can use your imagination. He turned the TV off. All the kids were sleeping. It was like, there was like four of us in the bed. So you had two kids, then Jeff, then me on the end. So that basically protected him from the other kids knowing what was going on. And so after the John Wayne movie went off, he went under the covers and he performed oral sex on me. And that was the first time that I'd ever had oral sex performed on me.
But in the bed with the other kids, in the bed as well?
Yeah, and I think, all right, so I don't, it's 40 something years ago. So I don't know exactly the layout, but it was me on the edge, Jeff, and then I think it was another kid that he had molested who was a year older than me. So he had aged out. So Jeff had basically left him and went to me. And then you had another kid. So I don't know who that other kid was. It could have been one of my brothers. But, we're 10 years old. Let's say Jeff was 160 pounds. He's blocking everyone. So he has that shield to where he can turn like this and no one on this backside can see what he's doing. But I do think the one kid that was next to him who had been molested before, he knew exactly what was going on.
And then he, correct me if I'm wrong, but he brought it up the next day and told you essentially just not to say anything?
All right, so now you got to go back a month. So that was March, the Crawfish Bowl, when he started fondling me. And so I pretended like I was sleeping. So when he asked me the next day, are you going to tell your parents? And I'm like, well, tell them what? And so when I think I made that excuse to him, he knew, okay, you know what? He's not going to say anything. I think that's the day I made an A on the test.
Yeah, so essentially he knew at that point that he was kind of he had a green light to do what he wanted at the moment.
The grooming process is a gradual state. Think about when you lost your virginity. You know, you go to the movie, then you hold her hand, and then you put your arm around her. It's a dance. It's literally no different. I mean, it is different because it's a kid versus a consenting adult, but you can't just grab them by the, like Trump said. You kind of have to, kind of kiss them on the cheek and hold their hand, and you got to make sure you have consent, and that's what pedophiles do. They got to make sure that, and it's not consent because they're underage, but what I'm saying is they have to make sure that this kid won't tell, and they gradually do it. It's a process where they can go, oh no, it's an accident. They can talk their way out of it. So just don't let your kids around adults.
Right. I mean, it's very psychological. So after the event in that hotel room, how did the abuse escalate from there for you? What ended up happening next?
All right. So going back to Houston, when he performed oral sex on me the first time, he would probably do that every day for the next month. And then a month later, in May of '83, he was like, and I forget his language, but basically he told me he was going to have sex with me. And it was at the karate studio. I had spent the night. Yeah, he started having sex with me.
At that time, you were so young. How did that feel, keeping that to yourself?
To me, it wasn't an option. To me, it was just like, all right, I'm going to keep it to myself. And I did an interview a couple weeks ago, but I remember this, like Jeff was controlling, and you know how they say rape and molestation is about power and control? I want to put an amendment to that. Like, Jeff was attracted to kids. So him wanting to have sex with me had nothing to do with power and control. He liked kids. I was cute. But the power and control is to keep the child from telling in these situations. Yeah, it wasn't a situation where I wanted it, but he had that, and it's called coercive control, because I made up my mind that even when Jeff was arrested, I went to the hospital and they did a rape kit, a forensic exam on me, and I knew it was going to come back positive, but I had made up my mind that I was not going to tell the truth until I would have been believed, until there was no doubt I had been molested. And so it was March 9th, 1984, a week before the shooting. And Mike Burnett, who was the police officer who led the investigation, he told my parents that the hospital report came back positive. And when my mother sat me down, I admitted it. But when I had been brought back, I had to go to the police station to be interrogated. And the cops said that we interrogated this kid. We put him through, like, if you watch the first 48, when they're like just, trying to hammer the guy to make him confess, that's what they were doing to me. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't think today they could get away with it, because there would be a victim advocate in the room with the kid, and they could not try to make me confess. They were trying to get a confession out of an 11-year-old boy, and I wasn't gonna do it. And so they went back into the office with my parents and said, and it was like a 3-hour investigation or interrogation. And they went back in there and they said, either that boy is too brainwashed, he'll never admit it, or that man never touched him. So I had convinced the cops that maybe he didn't molest me, but I was waiting on that hospital report. And a week later, when that hospital report came back, I admitted it. And being under the coercive control that I was under, that was the cutting the ribbon. That was popping the pimple. That was like one of the greatest feelings I ever had. I was like, you know what? I am not under Jeff's control anymore. And unfortunately, a week later, Daddy shot him. And I say unfortunately, because I would have rather Jeff go to jail for the rest of his life, which would have been like 3 years, because I know I would have made a good witness. I would have been a good witness that Jeff would have gone to jail for the rest of his life. Daddy let him off easy. We're all going to die. I mean, shit. Malcolm Jamal Warner died. Ozzy died. We'll talk about the death later, but we're all going to die. Jeff didn't know it. Like, the one TV death that reminds me of Jeff is when they shot the lawyer in Ozark, the woman lawyer. Yeah. Like, she didn't see it coming. Neither did Daddy. But we're all gonna die. Like, Jeff just took his next step and was gone.
Yeah, it's almost to some people like an easy way to go, especially with someone like him. One weekend before any of this was brought up, you spent the weekend with, I think it was your uncle, and he noticed that something was going on with you, but your dad kind of defended Jeff, thought he was a good guy at that point, right? What would have happened with that?
It would have probably been July of '83. We went to Fort Worth, Texas, and fought at the Pro-Ams. And actually, Billy Blanks fought there. The Tybo guy, he was there. And actually, we stayed at the hotel across the street from the Water Gardens, which was like literally a block away from the Tarrant County Convention Center. And I think I saw my first celebrity. I saw Ray Charles. He didn't see me, but he was in the lobby, and he was like 5 foot tall. He was like tiny. So my uncle lived in Dallas. So on that trip, we were going to stay with my cousins. And so Jeff met my uncle, on the side of Interstate 30, I think it was, and kind of made the exchange. But when I got out the car, and I don't even remember this, but my uncle does, obviously, like Jeff gave me a kiss on the mouth. And my uncle was like, that's kind of screwed up. So he told my dad, he's like, I don't kiss my kids on the mouth. Like, this grown man should not be kissing your kid on the mouth. But my dad was so kind of, I guess, groomed that he was like, oh no, Jeff loves kids. He's very affectionate. And, so he just kind of wrote it off. But my uncle was like, no, you're wrong. And my uncle was right.
Yeah. I mean, and unbeknownst to your family at the time, if I'm saying this correctly, Jeff was scamming people too, right?
Oh yeah. He was writing bad checks. He had came up with this business, which actually it goes to show the character of this dumbass, because he had a good idea. He came up with this LSU bandana, which was similar to the Pittsburgh Terrible Towel, where, it was tiger stripe, purple and gold. And my dad actually introduced him to a guy named Don Landers, who owned like these little convenience stores called Cracker Barrel, which is more Circle K, 7-Eleven than it is the old home country store that you see now when you go driving down the interstate. But my dad introduced him, and they made a deal. But Jeff took the initial payment and didn't buy the bandanas and went and spent it. And so Don Landers needed these bandanas, but Jeff didn't have them. And so that's kind of like, the bad checks, the embezzlement, Don was going for his money, and Jeff had a court date. I want to say it was the 15th. I could be wrong, of March, because he was shot the 16th. But so he basically was leaving town to avoid prosecution. But because he was a pedophile and had a relationship with me, he didn't want to leave his love interest at home. So he took me with him like a dope. If he would have just left, he'd still be alive. No one would care. But he kidnapped me, and that's what happened.
When you were kidnapped, what was going through your mind at the time?
I was asked this recently, and you got to understand, I had been being raped from May of '83 till February of '84. So the sexual abuse part was kind of normal. So to me, as an 11-year-old taking a bus from Orange, Texas to Los Angeles, California, and to see the Hollywood sign, to go to Disneyland, that was a damn vacation for me. Like, that was, because the 2 days on the bus, he couldn't molest me. So that was a break. So I actually enjoyed, I try to look at the positive. I'm not a half full guy. I'm like, who left the cup out? But yeah, no, it was better for me.
I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense, especially based on, the mind of what would be a kid, how young you were. What do you remember from those weeks that followed that event when you were actually in California with him? Is there anything that stuck out that happened, or any kind of emotion or thoughts that you remember having?
Like I said, I love my childhood. I wouldn't change nothing about it. I got to see him film Hill Street Blues. Like, me and Jeff were walking down the street, and there was like police, and there was like cameras and lights. And Jeff was like, oh, we gotta go. I'm like, no. I'm like, they're filming a movie or a TV show. Because in '82, maybe '81, but when I was in 4th grade, they filmed The Toy in Baton Rouge with Richard Pryor and Jackie Gleason. And so we went downtown one night, and we just literally walked up and down the street. We were going to be extras. We didn't make the final cut, but we were extras in the movie The Toy. And so I recognized the fact that was probably like a film production. So we went down, and we probably sat there 2-3 hours watching them filming this scene from Hill Street Blues. So yeah, that stands out. That was, and like I said, going to Disneyland. I mean, who gets kidnapped and taken to Disneyland?
And it's so interesting. I mean, like, your parents were obviously having like their worst nightmare come to life, but to you, having experienced it for so long, it's like the total opposite, almost. But eventually, the police did show up to your motel in California. What happened then, and like what was that like?
All right, so I don't want to give kidnapping tips, but if you ever kidnap a 11-year-old boy, don't call their parents collect. He let me call my mother collect, and immediately my mother asked for time and charges, which for those people who are too young to understand what collect is, if you were calling not from your phone, the other person would pay for it. So we were calling from the motel. My mother agreed to pay for the for the phone call. And so when she asked for time and charges, so the operator came back on and said, look, it was, 20 minutes and it was be $38. So she asked for the time, how long it was, and the charges, how much it cost. Well, then Mike Burnett got on the phone and said, look, this is a, FBI investigation. We need to know the exact location of that phone call. And they got it. And then they came busting in the room. Unfortunately, I was sitting on the bed and I was closest to the door. So when they busted in the door, they put guns in my face. They were putting guns at Jeff. This one cop walked around the bed and he's like, I ought to punch you in your GD face. Was that something for Facebook? GD face? You know what I'm saying. But so and that was the last time they took me out of the room, and that was the last time I saw Jeff alive. I've seen him dead on video a lot.
And when you got home after that, there were cameras everywhere, and the news obviously wanted, to try get on this story. Was that bizarre?
Well, all right, so remember I told you that my dad worked for Channel 2? So my dad contacted Channel 2, and they sent a crew out for my arrival at the New Orleans airport. And if you look at the video, I look like an abused child. My hands are in my pocket. I don't hug my parents. They're trying to hug me, and I'm just like, I have my hands in my pocket. We're walking down the corridor doing B-roll, and I got my hands in my pocket. I look like an abused child. And I'll tell you a funny story. My friend Joanne called me yesterday. She used to work for Geraldo, and she called me, and she's like, oh my God, I was just watching some video about Justin Bieber. Have you seen the Justin Bieber and P. Diddy video where they're talking about, oh, he's going to get the car? And she's like, he has your eyes. He has the same eyes you had when you were returned. And I'm like, yeah, like when I watched the video of P. Diddy and Justin Bieber, I was like, no doubt P. Diddy's a predator. Like, gun to my head, I'm going to live.
Yeah, I mean, that's a side note, but that is a really bizarre video of Diddy and Bieber, and just like, that just makes no sense. But I mean, according to the government, he's not a pedophile or anything. So, of course.
I think according to the government, Epstein did nothing wrong.
Yeah, no, he was innocent, man.
Well, why is Ghislaine in jail if Epstein was innocent?
Interestingly enough, this is a side note tangent, but people say that Epstein, there's all this discourse like, where's the list? Give us the list. I'm really good friends with the guy who actually helped break the Epstein story back in like 2012. He was trying to get his flight logs and his black book published. And he was telling me in January of this year that, because we were working on a different project together, he was saying, there is no list, Colin. Like, the thing that you need to look for is the black book. So this is weird, but I have a copy of Epstein's black book with all the numbers. This is like a photocopy that someone gave me of his entire address book. This is essentially the list. And the real version has circles and underlining, and like Nick, the guy that I'm working on this with, he has a copy of that with all the circles. And he's like, the people who are circled in the black book are more than likely the people that were purchasing these underage individuals from Epstein. And in huge circles and underlined is Trump, which is insane. And then you think, why are they not talking about this? And I mean, that's just a side tangent, but it's just crazy, man, how they cover this shit up.
No, and to me, that's awesome, because for example, let's say P. Diddy's white parties. He invites all these celebrities, and I think Denzel Washington or someone went, and you can go be invited to a party. It doesn't mean you're going to be screwing kids. It means you leave at midnight, then they screw the kids when you're gone.
Exactly.
So just because someone's on that list, then it doesn't mean that they're screwing kids. But if you're circled and underlined 15 times with exclamation points, odds are you like them.
Yeah, people don't want to talk about that. I don't know why. I don't know why that the black book with the scribbles and everything hasn't been publicized more, but
I don't think he's dead.
I've heard that from a lot. Well, interestingly, something you won't see brought up a lot about Epstein that I just had like a 2-hour-long conversation with Nick, this guy, about the other day, is that Epstein, in documents that were FOIA'd and just victim testimony, he was really into cloning. Like there are 2 victims of Epstein's who have said that they woke up on Little St. James after they had been drugged, and they were in like a lab. Like, it sounds like something out of a sci-fi film. Like Epstein was working on like cloning people, which is so bizarre, but there's like a ton of evidence in these documents that's like talking about this shit without directly saying it. You just have to hear him talk. It's like the craziest, most bizarre conspiracy. But the dude that I'm friends with, he's an investigative journalist. Like, he spent his whole life writing for like Variety, New York Times. Like, he's a no bullshit, no conspiracy guy. And so to have him talking to me about this for hours, I'm just like, it's so outside the realm of possibility for me. When you're actually just a normal human being, you're like, not only this dude like a pedophile supplying kids to whatever you want to call them, the elite, powerful, whoever, but he's also got his hand in the honeypot of like cloning and all this weird governmental research. It's just crazy shit. So then when you say he might be alive, it's like maybe his clone was killed. Maybe he wasn't even killed in general. There was never any body or grave or anything. So yeah, I don't know. It's don't get me started, man, because I could talk for hours about Epstein.
Can I get a minute to go get my tinfoil so I can put my hat on?
You know, I've got a little piece right here. Maybe we could fashion a little cap out of it. How did it feel for you, and what was it like when you were finally able to, you know, admit and like tell your parents about what had really happened? And what was your dad's reaction to that information like?
Well, he did not respond well. He was upset, and then he went and murdered somebody. So he didn't take it as good as I did. But no, when it finally came out, for me, it was like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. Like, I didn't have to keep the secret no more. And like in the foreword of my book, my best friend tells a story, and he talks about like, I would never lie to you, because I was put in a situation to where I was asked to tell a lie and I wouldn't do it. And so I don't like the burden of carrying falsehoods. So I won't lie. If you come to me and go, hey, do I look fat in this dress? I'd be like, oh, well, you know, you might need another dress. Or I won't lie, but I won't be dishonest. I'm like, oh, you know, you might want another dress. So I just don't like the burden of lying. And after I had to lie to the cops in that 3-hour interview, I was like, I'm never going to lie again. And I actually did tell a lie one time. And I called my best friend. This is probably like 4 years ago. And I was like, dude, I told a lie. Like, I just don't lie. I won't tell the truth, but I won't lie. I won't, I don't know how to put it. I won't not tell the truth, but I'll deflect, but I won't lie.
How did you find out that your dad had killed Jeff?
All right. So actually that was a Friday night and I had gone to bed. It was the next morning. My grandparents took us back to Baton Rouge because we had gone to our camp, lake house on False River, which is a lake. And my mother showed up with my uncle, sat us on the steps of my grandparents' house, and was like, last night Jeff came in, and when he did, Daddy shot him. And at the time, Jeff was not officially dead, but his fate had been determined. And so, like, they're like, he's not dead yet. And they told me, they said, whatever you do, don't go look at the papers, don't look at the news. And so the first thing I did was look at the papers and look at the news.
And what emotions did you feel when you found out he had been killed or was almost dead?
I was sad Jeff was dead. I was sad Jeff was dead. Like, I didn't want him dead, but as I said earlier, I would have liked it for him to go to jail for the rest of his life. I think I would have been a great witness, but that's not what happened. But fortunately, we have a video that is celebrated every March 16th, every Father's Day, and my dad stands as a symbol of justice, and I would not trade that for anything.
After that happened, talking to your dad, what was the first conversation between you guys?
I never talked to my dad about it. The only thing that I can recall that is closest to answering your question is the summer. So it would have been, June, July, maybe August. The shooting happened March. So it would have been the summer. We were walking down to the pool, and I told him, I said, just so you'll know, I forgive you. I don't hate you. I understand why you did what you did. And after that, our lives got back to kind of pre-Jeff. It was back to normal. I was still daddy's boy. You're gonna make me cry. I never doubt that he loved me. He was awesome. He's better than the memes. All right, gotta quit.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. I mean, what a crazy thing.
I don't like crying, but after I turned 50, I turned into Dick Vermeil, and only undercover boss used to make me cry. All right, let me ask you a question. What's the first movie that ever made you cry?
I remember sobbing at Lilo and Stitch when I was younger, which is just weird. And then you got Old Yeller too on the old VHS when the dog gets killed. That was a visceral memory for me.
Cool Runnings, The Sandlot, and Beaches are the only three movies that ever made me cry. But since I turned 50, I cry at everything. You asked me a question. Oh, what's your favorite memory about your dad? And I'm like,
I'm like that too, man. I've cried at a lot more than 3 films. So that used to be kind of my thing, especially before I got sober. But I guess I'm almost done with questions. I just want to make sure your phone doesn't die. What was the community's response where you were at to the shooting? Do you remember what that was like?
Very supportive, just like now, of my father. People would send money to the Gary Plauche fund, and they would put Gary Plauche USA, and it would go to Baton Rouge. They didn't have an address. They just put Gary Plauche USA, and it would go to Baton Rouge. And actually, I'll speak with my friend Dwayne Perry. He might be related to Jeff somehow. He had been a rebel back in his day. We're friends on Facebook, but he always defends Jeff. He's like, Jeff was in handcuffs. He was in police custody. He didn't get his day in court. And, Gary shot a man who had not had his day in court. And I will like Dwayne's post because we both agree that, Jeff was a U.S. citizen. His brother fought in Vietnam. Jeff deserved his day in court. I wish Jeff had his day in court, so it would have been proven that he did what he did to me, because I don't like any speculation that it was anything other than that. And so, and me and Dwayne, he came into my work about 2 years ago. I gave him a hug. I'd be more than happy to go out and cook and drink with him, but I'll also support his belief that Jeff deserved his day in court, and I believe that.
I understand, what you're saying too. It's interesting to hear that perspective, because so many people you see online, blindly, obviously supportive of having Jeff executed, essentially. But it's very interesting to hear you talk about it from that perspective. And then kind of going off that, how did you feel, or what do you feel today about the sentence that your father received for what happened?
I don't think he should have got probation. Maybe the community service. No, I believe that my dad, no one would have convicted him. Like I said, I would have been a good witness. I would have been a good witness in his defense too. I believe it was just. My dad never committed another crime. Maybe a DUI, but my dad was a model citizen. He wasn't a criminal before. He wasn't a criminal after. He had no rap sheet. And like the judge said, putting him in jail would do no good. It actually would have been worse. You would have had a single mother with 4 kids trying to raise these kids. It would have been a worse on a society. But like I said, I do love the fact that many people enjoy the fact that my father stands as a face for justice.
And even after all of this, I mean, what a childhood that you had with so many just kind of bizarre, strange, hurtful things that happen. You've gone on to live like a very inspirational life, fighting for justice too for kids. How would you describe your own life after all of this?
I'll tell you what, I would not change anything. If I could relive my life, I would do it in a heartbeat. But my book has a lot of good information for parents. So if you're a parent, you have kids, and even if you're a victim, I think there's a lot of good information, because you don't have to be destroyed because something like that happens, because goddamn, it happens to most people. You just accept it, move on, and you don't have to be scarred for life. You don't have to be a victim. I hate the term survivor, and I don't even like thriver, because trust me, I'm not thriving right now. But you can be okay. I end my book with a Helen Keller quote, and it was, "The world is full of suffering, but it's also full of the overcoming of it." And that's my take. And I'm a bitch.
No, it's okay, man. You're making me tear up over here too. What do you remember about the last time you saw your father before he passed?
I went to a wedding. It was Saturday. I went to the wedding, and LSU was playing Kentucky that day. And my best friend Dave, he drove in from Dallas, and I had forgotten I was going to the wedding. So we were going to go to the LSU Kentucky game, football game. And I said, "Dave, I got to go to this wedding." So I went to the wedding. I left early. We went to the Kentucky game. Well, that Monday, I had scheduled a speech at Northlake College where I met Dave in Irving, Texas, where I went to school for 2 years. And I had scheduled a program months earlier. And so I told Dave, I said, "Well, I'll just ride back with you." So I booked a one-way flight from Dallas to Baton Rouge, and we went and parked my truck at the airport. And so me and Dave, we left the airport heading back to Dallas, and I said, "Who do you want to go see? Do you want to go see Daddy or Uncle Jeff?" Uncle Jeff was my dad's brother, who had just been recently diagnosed with throat cancer. He had it 10 years earlier. He had gone through chemotherapy and radiation. He had a tracheotomy, but it had came back. And so me and Dave made the decision to go see my Uncle Jeff out at Falls River, the same camp that I was at. Well, it wasn't the same camp. It was the same river that I was at when I found out, where I was at when Daddy shot Jeff. I didn't find out until we went back home. So we went and visited Uncle Jeff on Falls River, and we drove to Dallas. That Monday morning, I gave a speech at Northlake that went very well. I flew home from DFW, where Jeff flew home, to Baton Rouge. And I tell people, what are the odds that I flew to the Baton Rouge airport from Dallas-Fort Worth the night my dad died? But I got home about 9 o'clock that night, had a few beers. My sister came over around probably 11 o'clock. And one of the people at the nursing home had found my dad dead, and they called my sister. And so my sister came over, got my mother. They went to the nursing home to, verify it. I called my little brother. He lives across the street. We had a few beers, and we just kind of reflected on, Teddy's, I don't know the word, his meaning to people. Like, he means a lot to a lot of people. Just go to Twitter or X. Go to X and type in Gary Plauche. I mean, he's more popular now than he's ever been. And I'm more of a baby than I've ever been.
No, I think it's beautiful, man. I mean, you could tell that the love is still there, and the meaning. And that's my final question. You led into it. A lot of people consider your father to be like the classic archetype of a hero. What do you think of your dad's legacy all these years later? How does that make you feel, and how has that impacted you?
All right, so Dustin Poirier just fought in New Orleans, his final fight, UFC. I don't know if you follow UFC, but he's from Lafayette, Louisiana, and he lost. I didn't see the fight, so I don't know whether he won or not. You know, I mean, pay-per-view events are kind of rigged, going back to conspiracy theory. But he posted a picture earlier today or yesterday of his daughter gave him a belt, and it said "Best Dad Ever." So he didn't win the UFC belt, but he got a belt from his daughter that said "Best Dad Ever." And I'm like, you know what? Now that my dad's dead, there were several like places on Facebook that had posted it, so I don't know which one I responded to, but I said, you know what? Now that my dad's dead, I'm glad you kept the title in Louisiana. So, you know, people say my dad's the father of the century, the decade, and here I go again. Take away the shooting. Take away the shooting. He still wins. He still wins. I mean, he was a fucking awesome guy. I wish I could be like him, other than the cheating and the alcoholism.
Wow, man. You've become obviously a fierce advocate for victims and children. Anything you'd like to tell our audience about like safety with kids nowadays, or any tips that you'd have, anything you've learned along this journey?
I have one tip that I like to give everybody. If someone wants to spend more time with your kid than you do, that's a red flag. Actually, it's a rocket ship. It's an Elon Musk SpaceX blowing up at the base when it returns home. It's the biggest red flag you can have.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we're done here?
Like I said, just because you go through something that's negative doesn't mean that you can't come out on the other side as positive. But God darn it, I gotta go to paper towel now because I'm snotting, crying, but no.
Someone's cutting onions in your house, man. What are you guys cooking dinner over there or something?
Trust me, I wish I was cooking. You can go to my YouTube site if you want to see like good red beans and rice recipe. You know what? All of you people, go watch one of my red beans and rice recipes, cook them, and tell me it's not the best damn red beans and rice you ever had, because it's delicious.
And what about your book and like website, man?
Like jodyplauche.net. Me and my best friend, we're trying to book speaking engagements coming up. So if you want to have me come to your town to give my Victim to Victory speech, I'll be more than happy to do it. I like to end with funny stories. And you know what? I'll tell a funny story before my battery runs dead. So in 2002, the whole Catholic Church scandal happened where the Boston Globe was reporting on all that, and like it just went nuts. So I called a friend of mine, rest in peace, Art Harris. He was working for CNN, and I called him up and I said, hey, look, I'm working at Victim Services Center. I'm doing child sexual abuse prevention programs. Like, do you want to like do an update? Because it was topical. And so he talked to his people and they sent a crew up. And we were at this Brook Elementary in Royersford, Pennsylvania. And it was a second grade class, because I specifically wanted a second grade class because they were cute, they were still young, and they weren't stupid like the kindergartners. So I recommended a second grade class, and we got approval for. So they sent the camera, sound guy, producer, correspondent, guidance counselor, principal, teacher. So there's all these people in this room while I'm doing a no-go and tell to a second grade class. And so I get to the part where we're talking about inappropriate sexual touch of children, and we call that secret touching. And this little boy, he raises his hand. Normally I wouldn't have called on him. And so secret touching is when an adult tries to touch a child's private parts for no good reason. The good reasons being going to the doctor, checking for ticks. There was several good, changing a baby's diaper. We didn't want to ruin prom for anybody, so we would go over appropriate reasons. And so the little boy goes, sometimes you can secret touch yourself. I was like, dude, I'm 25 and single. You don't have to tell me about that. And that's not what I said. That's what went through my head. But I was like, no, if you're touching yourself, it's not a secret. But so I thought I acted pretty good. But yeah, the fact that he was like, sometimes you can secret touch yourself. Oh God, trust me, I got the title belt.
Oh shit, man. Yeah, I love that ending on a.
Yeah, nothing like a good old jerk off story to end with.